The rain fell hard over the quiet streets of Lansing, Michigan, on the evening of August 17, 2001. Streetlights flickered, casting pools of yellow across the wet pavement. Puddles formed in cracks along the asphalt, reflecting the neon signs of small shops that remained open late. Clara Benson, 19 years old, left her job at a downtown cafe carrying her canvas backpack filled with textbooks and sketches for her graphic design class. She had worked hard to save for her first apartment, balancing school and part-time work with a bright determination. Clara had a presence that made people take notice without effort. Chestnut hair curled around her shoulders, freckles dusted across her nose, and her laughter echoed through the cafe where she worked, often stopping colleagues mid-task. Her roommates spoke of her kindness, her ability to listen, to make anyone feel important. That night, she walked the familiar streets toward her apartment, enjoying the quiet of the city, unaware that someone was following her. At 9:17 p.m., surveillance from a corner store caught her pausing outside a building on Oak Ridge Avenue. She looked over her shoulder, adjusting her backpack strap, but the camera showed nothing more, no signs of a struggle, no sudden movement. A dark sedan rolled slowly behind her. The rain blurred the vehicle's edges, and then Clara vanished. Her roommate, Jasmine Cole, became worried the following morning when Clara didn't return home. She called friends and the cafe, but no one had seen her since the previous night. Police were notified, and detectives arrived at her apartment to find a scene that was oddly empty of struggle. Her keys, wallet, cell phone, and backpack were all missing. A few sketches remained in her desk, but most were gone. Detective Mark Ridley noted the strange nature of her disappearance. Clara was cautious and aware of her surroundings. She would never leave without notice. Neighbors reported seeing a blue sedan circling the block that evening and a man mid-30s smoking a cigarette by the car. But descriptions were inconsistent. Without a license plate or solid evidence, the investigation struggled to move forward. Clara's mother, Clara Benson, refused to stop searching. She held vigils outside the cafe and at Clara's favorite park, carrying a photograph of her daughter's bright, smiling face. She wouldn't run away, Eleanor told anyone who would listen. She wouldn't hurt anyone. Someone took her, and we will find out who. The first year brought hundreds of leads. Police canvassed the area, interviewed neighbors, co-workers, and strangers. Tips poured in from local and national media outlets, but none led to Clara. A psychic claimed she sensed Clara near an abandoned warehouse, but the information proved vague. By 2003, the case had grown cold. Detective Ridley, now a lieutenant, filed the evidence in a cabinet labeled Cold Cases Active. Lansing moved on, but Eleanor and her family never gave up. Her younger brother, Ryan Benson, organized art displays and community events showcasing Clara's sketches. Every year on August 17th, friends and family walked the streets she had known, hoping to feel her presence. Her memory refused to fade. In 2019, the Michigan State Police formed a cold case unit, funded to review unsolved cases before 2010. Detective Samantha Cruz reviewed Clara's file and discovered items long thought insignificant, including a cigarette butt collected near the street where she was last seen. At the time, technology could not extract usable DNA from such a degraded sample. But advances in massively parallel sequencing meant this cigarette could finally reveal its secrets. The lab received the sample in February 2020. Forensic scientists swabbed it carefully, isolating trace cells from the filter. Weeks later, the DNA profile emerged. Unlike older methods, which required larger samples, this technology created a full profile from a single cigarette butt. When the sample was run through CODIS, a match appeared. Jonathan Harker, a Lansing handyman with no criminal record. Harker had lived quietly for decades, repairing homes, helping neighbors, and earning a reputation as trustworthy. But now he became the prime suspect. Investigators confirmed that he often smoked the same brand found in the evidence, and that he was seen near Oak Ridge Avenue the night Clara disappeared. When confronted, Harker initially laughed, denying any involvement. "You're telling me a cigarette proves something?" he said. But every discarded item police collected, from coffee cups to another cigarette butt, confirmed the initial DNA match. His presence at the scene could no longer be denied. The community reeled. For years, Harker had been a friendly, helpful figure. Neighbors waved, invited him into their homes, trusted him without question. Now that trust was shattered. Clara Benson, after receiving news of the DNA match, whispered to herself, "After all this time, it's really him." Harker's arrest in early April 2020 was quiet but deliberate. His home was searched thoroughly. Investigators discovered tools capable of restraint, notes and photographs of locations near Oak Ridge Avenue. Every detail aligned with the evidence from Clara's disappearance. The realization that a person who had seemed ordinary could conceal such darkness shook the entire city. While awaiting trial, the case drew attention to how modern forensic science can solve crimes long considered impossible to unravel. The cigarette, a seemingly insignificant object, had preserved the key to unlocking the mystery. Clara's story became a reminder that persistence and careful preservation of evidence can deliver justice. Even after decades of uncertainty, the Benson family, though still grieving, felt a measure of relief. For years they had held on to hope, refusing to forget. Now they finally knew the truth about what had happened to Clara. Her life, taken too soon, had finally been recognized and accounted for. The city of Lansing, the community that had lived with fear and questions, began to process a mixture of vindication, shock, and sorrow. The investigation revealed more than just a crime. It exposed the fragility of trust. A man who appeared harmless, helpful, and kind had caused unimaginable pain. For neighbors, friends, and family, the revelation forced a painful reckoning with appearances, assumptions, and the hidden darkness some carry. Clara's sketches, her laughter, her presence in the lives of those who knew her, all became symbols of the life that had been stolen. The cigarette butt, once overlooked, had now restored her voice, her story, and the beginning of justice long delayed. In the weeks after Jonathan Harker's arrest, Lansing became a city caught between disbelief and grim satisfaction. People replayed memories in their minds, ordinary encounters now tinged with suspicion. Who had he smiled at? Whose homes had he entered with a friendly nod, unaware of the darkness he carried? The coffee shop where Clara had worked emptied more slowly now, with lingering looks at the counter where she had once laughed, gesturing to friends with sketches in hand. Detective Samantha Cruz led the interviews and evidence review, reconstructing the night of August 17, 2001. Using surveillance footage, enhanced digitally in ways unavailable in 2001, she traced Clara's movements block by block. The grainy recording from a pharmacy showed Harker's dark sedan passing Oak Ridge Avenue multiple times between 9 and 9:20 p.m., corroborating the timeline established from witness statements. Additional neighbors recalled a man smoking near the streetlight, the faint glow from the cigarette briefly illuminating his face. Their testimonies, once dismissed as minor observations, now carried new weight. Harker, once cooperative in casual conversation with neighbors and city officials, became increasingly withdrawn under questioning. His lawyer attempted to paint him as someone misidentified, insisting that the DNA evidence was flawed. But Cruz, backed by the forensic team, had preserved chains of custody for every piece of evidence. From the cigarette butt to the coffee cup, to swabs collected from door handles he had touched, each trace pointed directly to him. He was no longer just a suspect. The science made him undeniable. The Benson family immersed themselves in the case, attending every hearing, every procedural step. Eleanor spoke with prosecutors daily, insisting they pursue every detail. Ryan Benson catalogued everything for public records, photographs, and news articles, maintaining a meticulous account of what the family had endured. For nearly 2 decades, they had lived with unanswered questions. Now every discovery cut both ways, relief at knowing the truth, grief at what had been lost. One of the most damning pieces of evidence was found when investigators examined Harker's sedan, impounded from the day of his arrest. Forensic teams detected fibers and traces of Clara's clothing near the passenger seat. The upholstery bore microscopic scratches consistent with a struggle. Harker's fingerprints were everywhere, but there were also partial prints belonging to Clara, indicating she had been forcibly removed from the sidewalk and placed inside the vehicle. The discovery transformed circumstantial evidence into a near-certain reconstruction. Public reaction grew as more details emerged. Lansing residents who had once considered Harker a neighbor or helpful handyman began sharing stories online, instances of his seemingly benign curiosity, sudden invitations, or unsolicited assistance. Patterns that had seemed harmless in isolation now formed a disturbing mosaic. A woman recalled he had once asked to photograph her apartment's interior under the guise of lighting study. Another mentioned that he often walked streets at night, smoking, watching quietly, noting who was where. The revelation that Harker had been under the community's radar for years provoked widespread reflection on trust and perception. Clara's sketches, stored carefully by her family, became central to remembering her as more than a victim. Exhibitions at local galleries highlighted her talent, featuring early pieces she had created in high school. Pieces showing urban streets, shadows of people, and reflections in windows seemed almost prophetic in their observation of the human world, with hidden stories behind ordinary facades. Art critics and friends remarked how her work captured subtle truths that sometimes went unnoticed. It was as if Clara had trained her eyes to see through the ordinary, even if she could not foresee her own fate. In January 2021, nearly 20 years after her disappearance, the trial began. Courtrooms in Lansing were packed with journalists, neighbors, and family. Prosecutor Linda Carter presented the DNA evidence first, showing how the cigarette butt, long forgotten in storage, had become the key to connecting Harker to Clara. She methodically laid out timelines, forensic results, and witness accounts, weaving a story that left no room for doubt. The defense attempted to discredit the DNA, citing degradation over time. They suggested cross-contamination in the lab, or errors in sequencing, but Cruz testified at length, demonstrating the meticulous methods used to preserve and analyze the sample. She explained the new sequencing technologies, the multiple verifications conducted, and the consistency of the DNA across different discarded items collected from Harker. Each claim the defense made was met with precise scientific rebuttals, leaving the courtroom with an overwhelming weight of evidence. One of the most emotionally charged moments came when Clara Benson took the stand. Her voice trembled as she recounted the nights she had spent calling Clara's name through the streets, driving past Oak Ridge Avenue, praying for some sign of her daughter. She spoke of hope mingled with despair, how each birthday, each holiday had been marked by absence. "I didn't stop believing she was out there," she said softly. "And now we finally know what happened." The courtroom fell silent, the magnitude of decades-long grief palpable in every corner. Forensic experts explained how the cigarette butt contained skin cells from Clara, preserved despite rain and time. Combined with partial fingerprints, fibers, and the traces found in Harker's vehicle, investigators could now present a reconstruction of the abduction. Clara had been walking home when Harker, passing slowly in his sedan, saw an opportunity. She had resisted, possibly tried to run or call out, but the proximity and timing allowed him to pull her into the car. Once inside, he transported her to a location he had prepared nearby, a small abandoned warehouse in Lansing's industrial district. There, evidence suggested she was restrained and the subsequent events led to her death. The trial lasted 6 weeks, and each revelation drew gasps from the public gallery. Harker remained stoic, offering minimal defense beyond technicalities, When the prosecution presented images of his vehicle, mapping the fibers and DNA traces to specific points inside, he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Witnesses included forensic technicians, neighbors, and city workers, each recounting seemingly minor interactions, now given devastating context. On May 14, 2021, the verdict was announced. Guilty on all counts of abduction and first-degree murder. The judge, in a measured voice, emphasized the deliberate predatory nature of the crime. The defendant exploited trust and familiarity for decades, she said. His actions inflicted immeasurable suffering, and justice, though delayed, is now delivered. Harker was sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole. For the Benson family, the sentence brought both relief and a hollow sorrow. Clara's absence remained a permanent scar, but the knowledge that the person responsible had been identified and punished allowed them to begin the slow process of healing. Community members organized memorials, restored the park near Oak Ridge Avenue, and established a scholarship fund in Clara's name to support young artists pursuing their dreams in graphic design. Clara's story reached beyond Lansing. True crime investigators, cold case units, and forensic scientists nationwide highlighted how small, overlooked evidence could finally deliver justice. The case became a model for the power of preservation, modern DNA technology, and meticulous investigative work. The cigarette butt, once thought inconsequential, had unlocked 2 decades of unanswered questions. Clara Benson, speaking at a public forum a year after the verdict, summed up the impact. Time cannot erase grief, but it cannot hide truth. Clara's life mattered, and even after 20 years we found answers. That's what keeps us going. Hope, persistence, and the belief that one day justice will find its way. The city of Lansing continued to remember Clara, not just as a victim, but as a young woman whose art, joy, and energy had left an indelible mark. Neighborhoods once wary and distrustful after the revelation of Harker's crimes gradually found a way to reclaim their sense of safety. Clara's story served as both a warning and an inspiration, that darkness can hide in plain sight, but careful eyes, science, and unwavering determination can uncover it. No matter how many years pass, even after the trial, Lansing felt the echoes of Clara Benson's story in ways that no one could have anticipated. Streets where she had walked alone on quiet August nights were now lined with remembrance plaques and murals painted by local students, each depicting moments from her life, her sketches, her laugh, her curiosity about the world. For the Benson family, these tributes were bittersweet, a celebration of Clara's life, a reminder of what had been stolen. The Hamilton Avenue community organized annual gatherings at the park near Oak Ridge Avenue. Neighbors, friends, and even people who had never met Clara attended, sharing memories, reading her writings, and discussing the importance of vigilance, empathy, and community safety. These gatherings became a ritual, helping the town collectively process trauma and honor the young woman whose absence had shaped their streets for 20 years. Clara Benson frequently spoke at these events. Her voice, once fragile with grief, had grown steady, carrying a message of perseverance and hope. Clara was more than the day she disappeared, she said during one ceremony. She was every smile, every sketch, every dream we have yet to realize. We carry her forward by living fully and protecting those around us. Investigators who had worked on the case reflected on the evolution of forensic science. Detective Samantha Cruz noted how the combination of preserved evidence, modern DNA sequencing, and meticulous investigative work had made this case possible. She visited law enforcement conferences across the country, demonstrating how a single overlooked cigarette butt, stored with care for decades, could ultimately break a case long considered unsolvable. It's a lesson for all of us, Cruz explained in one lecture. Patience, attention to detail, and respect for evidence are not just procedural. They can be the difference between justice and eternal silence. Clara's sketches, once tucked in boxes and notebooks, were compiled into a traveling exhibition. Galleries across Michigan and neighboring states displayed her work, highlighting her unique perspective on urban and rural life. Each piece was accompanied by context: the date it was drawn, notes from her journals, and reflections from Eleanor and Ryan Benson. Visitors often remarked on the haunting quality of her art, how it captured fleeting moments, hidden stories, and the fragile beauty of everyday life. Through her work, Clara continued to speak, teaching people to observe, to empathize, and to never overlook the small details that form the fabric of reality. The impact of the Benson case extended beyond art and memorials. Police departments across the United States began reviewing cold cases with an eye toward preserved evidence that might now be testable. Clara's abduction and murder became a case study in cold case units, illustrating how DNA technology and careful preservation could bring closure decades later. Cases once deemed hopeless were reopened, families previously left in limbo finally given answers, and investigators reinvigorated with the knowledge that even long-past crimes could be solved. For the Benson family, life gradually regained a measure of normalcy, though the scars of loss never fully disappeared. Eleanor dedicated herself to advocacy, speaking to policymakers about the importance of cold case funding, community vigilance, and educational programs on personal safety. Ryan continued to maintain the documentation of the investigation, publishing a detailed account of the case online to ensure transparency and to provide a resource for other families seeking justice. These efforts were not merely about remembering Clara. They were about ensuring that her story and the lessons it held could prevent. Public reaction to Jonathan Harker's conviction remained intense. Some residents continued to grapple with feelings of betrayal, questioning how someone so seemingly ordinary could commit such a horrific crime. Others found solace in the resolution, drawing strength from the fact that justice, though delayed, had arrived. Community psychologists held workshops addressing trust, grief, and recovery, helping neighbors process the collective trauma. For many, the act of sharing memories, fears, and reflections became a form of healing, reinforcing the idea that communities could emerge stronger, even after the most devastating breaches of trust. In the months following the trial, law enforcement agencies revisited other unresolved cases in Lansing and surrounding counties. The success of forensic genetic genealogy and DNA analysis inspired a renewed commitment to cold cases nationwide. Families who had waited decades for answers were finally contacted with new information. Investigations resumed, and in some cases, perpetrators brought to justice. Clara's story became a symbol of hope, proof that no matter how much time passes, evidence preserved with care could speak the truth. Clara's younger brother, Ryan, established a scholarship in her name at Lansing Art Institute, dedicated to students pursuing graphic design, illustration, and visual storytelling. Each recipient is encouraged to create work that illuminates overlooked narratives, reflecting the way Clara's own art captured the unnoticed details of life. For the recipients, the scholarship is more than financial support. It is a reminder that stories, once silenced, can find voice, and that the pursuit of truth is an enduring responsibility. Eleanor Benson, in interviews marking the anniversary of the conviction, emphasized the importance of resilience. Clara's voice was silenced, but the work to uncover the truth carried it forward. We had to wait 20 years to see justice, but we never stopped hoping. Families waiting for answers should hold on. Persistence and science can bridge decades of silence. She described how the Memorial Park, scholarships and exhibitions had transformed grief into purpose, ensuring Clara's life, though tragically cut short, continued to impact the world around her. Jonathan Harker remains incarcerated, his life fully contained within the prison walls. Investigators continue to examine any additional information he might provide, seeking closure for other cases potentially connected to him. Though his existence is now isolated, the shadow of his crimes continues to serve as a cautionary tale, highlighting how deception and ordinary appearances can mask extraordinary evil. For the citizens of Lansing, the Benson case left a legacy that transcends fear. It reinforced the value of vigilance, the necessity of community, and the power of science. It reminded people that even when answers seem impossible, perseverance, technology, and unwavering commitment to truth can restore order from chaos. Clara's life, her creativity, and her pursuit of observation became a guiding light, inspiring people to remain attentive, compassionate, and proactive. The cigarette butt that finally broke the case, once discarded and forgotten, now sits in the Lansing Police Museum, labeled as a turning point in cold case history. Visitors reflect on how an everyday object, treated with care and analyzed with patience, held the key to decades of unanswered questions. It is a tangible reminder that even the smallest traces can reveal monumental truths. Clara Benson's story continues to resonate in classrooms, galleries, and investigative units. It is shared not only as a narrative of tragedy and justice, but as an enduring lesson in hope, persistence, and the power of evidence. Through remembrance, advocacy, and the preservation of her art, Clara's voice endures. Though her life was stolen, her impact and the closure provided to her family demonstrates that justice, no matter how delayed, is a force that can ultimately illuminate even the darkest shadows. For families still searching for answers, the Benson case is proof that silence does not mean defeat. Each preserved sample, each overlooked detail, each patient investigator can become the instrument of resolution. The story of Clara Benson reminds the world that even decades later, truth can surface, victims can be remembered, and justice can prevail. To this day, Lansing honors Clara not just in memorials or scholarships, but in the very vigilance and care the community now extends to one another. Her life, her art, and her legacy continue to teach that every observation matters, every voice counts, and no crime, no matter how long hidden, is beyond the reach of